Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Feminist Astrologers podcast. My name is Carol Robertson and I am the Feminist Astrologer. Before we begin, as is my custom, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, skies and waterways of the world, and in particular I acknowledge the Paramount people who are the traditional custodians of the land where I am. I give my respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Paramount Nation, and I extend that respect to all other Aboriginal people. I recognise and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. So today is the 16th of November 2021, the time when I'm recording this, and this podcast is about the phases of the moon. I really like the phases of the moon because it's something that's often a little bit overlooked, I guess, in astrology. Not overlooked, but people don't necessarily put as much emphasis on it. But I think it has a really lot to do with how we relate and go about in the world around us. And the reason I say this is because in astrology, the sun and the sun sign represents kind of like your spirit, that part inside of you, that spark of what you want to be achieving and doing, and that purpose kind of feeling, and it doesn't have to be a great and grand purpose. I'm not talking about, my purpose is to save the world from hunger or, anything like that. But what it is that gives you that sense of purpose comes from your sun sign. But how you then go about bringing that purpose into reality and making that something real and physical in your life is generally done through your moon sign. So the sun and the moon kind of work together. And these are two of the most important parts of your chart. And yeah, you've got all these other planets going on in all other parts of your chart that have rulership over all sorts of different things in your life, like, your career and your money and your romance and your children and your creativity. And, all of those things have got different planets and things happening that are ruling over those things. But when it comes down to what is it that gives you that real sense of purpose, what is it that you feel is like your little place in this world, that comes down to the sun and the moon. And so the first thing that we see with the phases of the moon is that this is how the sun and moon are in relation to each other when you were born. So that is like our first clue of how the sun and the moon are going to actually work together to bring you the satisfaction that you want in your life. And you can call it purpose if you like. You don't have to call it purpose if that doesn't sit well with you. I know a lot of people kind of feel like, life doesn't have to always be about a purpose, and that's true. But there's a sense of rightfulness that you get when you're doing something that feels good and satisfying to you. So in a sense, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about your purpose, that thing that makes you feel like, yeah, I'm in the right place and I'm doing the right thing and I feel really satisfied. And that's where the sun and the moon kind of come together. So if you have never had your chart read and you don't know what phase of the moon you were born in, it's actually information you can get really easy just through Google. There's so many different time and date type websites and apps out there, and you can basically just Google what phase was the moon on such and such date, such and such year. And don't forget to put the year in, because the moon phase is not the same from year to year. You can't just go, the 18th of March was when I was born, and every 18th of March, that's the phase of the moon. It's going to be different, and the sign's going to be different. So, make sure you put the year in, because otherwise it will tell you the current year. and unless you're doing a baby's chart and they're just born, you don't necessarily want the current year's phase. So put your year in, date, year, and get that phase of the moon. So once you've Googled that and you've got that information, then you can tell which of those 8 phases, and a lot of people just think of the moon as in like a new moon and a full moon, but there's 8 different phases that the moon goes through. And each one kind of represents a different little sort of stage. And each of those phases lasts for like 45 degrees. So, you know, if you were born when the moon is full, that phase is going to last for another 45 degrees before it goes into the next phase. It might not look full in the sky anymore. You might go, oh, it doesn't look so full. But the full moon phase is still where it's at until it moves into the next phase every 45 degrees. So, even though it may not look that way, that's kind of the way that you are going to, I guess, present in a sense, and how you're going to interact through with that kind of phase. So if you do Google it, you're going to find that there may be a few different sort of variations of wording and stuff, because in astrology we've kind of got, you know, we call it a new moon, a crescent moon, a first quarter moon, gibbous moon, full moon, and so forth. We'll go through each one of them. But when it comes to, oh, there goes my cuckoo. It's not set to the right time, so don't listen to the cuckoos that are coming out. It's actually the correct time is 12 lunchtime, 12 noon in Adelaide at the moment, but I don't know how many cuckoos the cuckoo will decide to do. She's not quite functioning. Anyway, so getting back to our moon. So the new moon's always going to be referred to as a new moon. Crescent moon may be referred to as a waxing crescent. Okay, in astrology we'll just say crescent, but in some of those time and dates it might say a waxing crescent. That means a crescent moon. Then we've got a first quarter moon, which is pretty much always going to say that. Then we've got a gibbous moon, and again on some of the time and date sites that aren't specifically astrology, they're going to say, they might say a waxing gibbous moon, but we just refer to that as gibbous in astrology. Then we've got our full moon, then the disseminating moon. Now this is where we get this sort of things that go on with the time and date sites, because now they're going to go, oh, it's a waning gibbous. But in astrology we actually refer to it as a disseminating moon. Then we've got the third quarter, which sometimes is called the last quarter. And then we've got balsamic moon, which will often be referred to in non-astrological terms as a waning crescent. Now, the waxing and waning is just referring to, is the moon growing or is the moon shrinking? So from when it's a new moon up until a full moon, it's a waxing moon. It's growing and getting bigger and bigger in the sky every night. And then from the full moon down through to, you know, the next new moon, we've got a waning moon where it's getting smaller and smaller in the sky. And that's why they talk about a waxing crescent and a waning crescent, because they both look like crescents in the sky, albeit in the opposite direction to look at. But it's differentiating between, is it a growing crescent or is it a shrinking crescent? So that's your waxing and waning. Now, when you do find out what the sign, or sorry, what the phase of the moon that you were born in, try not to get disappointed. I was really disappointed, and I often tell this story about how, you know, I was born not long before the full moon, and I just wanted it to be a full moon because I just had this kind of romanticized idea in my mind of like, yes, the full moon, it's all very spiritual and lovely and beautiful, and I wanted to be born in the full moon. And but I was born just a bit before it turned full. Would have looked full in the sky, but it wasn't quite full. It was actually a gibbous moon. So I was really disappointed about that. But the more I learned about it, because this is right back at the beginning when I was first just learning astrology, and the more I kind of learnt about it and the more I saw about it, I went, oh yeah, I'm a gibbous moon. I am definitely a gibbous moon. You know, it moved into full fairly quickly after I was born, or, you know, a few hours after I was born, but I still definitely exhibit those gibbous moon traits. So yeah. So don't be disappointed, because all of the moons are wonderful in their own specific ways, and they're your moon, so own it, you know. So going through the phases. And this is the thing, just like we look at and go, oh, it's a full moon tonight, and we go, oh, it's a good time for this or a good time for that or whatever. If you're born under that particular phase, it's like those qualities are kind of embodied into you or into your way of going about things in the world. So we're kind of a reflection of that moon that we were born under. So if you happen to be a new moon person, this is when the sun and the moon have come together in a conjunction. And it's right at that moment when that conjunction starts to separate again. All right? So it's moving towards, separating and getting bigger again. It's waxing, This is your new moon. And this represents, and it's often, a lot of people describe the phases of the moon as like a plant, and I think it is one of the best ways to describe it. So it's kind of like you've got this little tiny seed. You're not even sure what the seed is, so you don't know what's going to actually grow from it. It's just this seed you've got. It's got all this potential because it could be absolutely anything, It could be absolutely anything. It's got all this wonderful potential in it. And this is the energy of the new moon. So people that are born during the new moon tend to have this really youthful, young energy where they've got all these kind of ideas, and they can practically go like, yeah, we could do anything we want. We can do this, we can do that. It's youthful. It's innocent. Sometimes it can be a bit naive in the way that it goes about things. They're eager to sort of embrace new ideas and experiences. There's a lot of spontaneity about these people. Their logic, doesn't work quite as well as their first instincts or impulses. So quite often it's actually their best way of going about things is to actually go with their first instincts, with their first impulses, because they've got really good instincts and impulses in that respect. Sometimes they can be shy though, because it's kind of that new moon and it's quite young. Some people will demonstrate this in that very shy, youthful way, like how children can be a bit shy. Children can kind of go either way. They can be all boisterous and excitable and full of life, or they can be really, really shy. So a new moon person can kind of go both ways. But either way, there's still that really youthful, young and open kind of to ideas, energy going on with them. So a very lovely moon to be born under. If you were born, and the new moon too, from a magical perspective, people often use the new moon to, if they want to do like magic and things to support new projects or new things that they want to do, if they want to bring something new into their life, this is the time when all you witchy folk will do kind of magic around the new moon to try and materialize something into their life. If you're not into the magic type stuff of things, it's still a good time for beginning new projects. You don't have to actually do it in a magical sense, but you might want to begin new projects and new ideas and new things around that time of the month, particularly short projects that you can actually get completed within that period of a month. You're timing it to the moon, which means that as the moon's moving through its phases, you're working with the moon on those various stages of the project. So it's a good time for that kind of stuff too. And people born in this phase are really good at initiating and starting those kinds of things. Crescent moon. So the moon's getting a little bit bigger now. We can see the crescent of her in the sky. So if we think of that plant, the seeds starting to shoot through, these little shoots and things are starting to come up. They're trying to make their way out of the shell, the husk of the seed. And in doing so, it's kind of leaving safety a little bit, like they're leaving the safety of this warm husk of the seed and entering out into this world. And this is a little bit of the energy that we've got around these crescent moon people, or waxing crescent moon people, because they're kind of wanting to break away from things. They might want to break away from family structures and things that have kept them in place for a long time. They want to try something new, try something different. They want to grow, they want to move. They are good at setting up sort of the I guess, the safety nets that they need. They're very good at thinking through, well, how can we do this? How can we break away from this? They can sometimes have a fear of their own confidence, you know, because they're leaving behind this safety. And oftentimes they're the people that, you know, family members might want to hold back because they're trying to protect them and keep them safe. Like, no, don't leave the safety of the husk. Stay here with us where it's warm and safe, you know. But they're like, no, I feel like I've really got to do this on my own. So, you know, their confidence can be a little bit shaky to begin with. But once they get going with it, they've got all these fabulous gifts and things to give to the world. And yeah, their part of their gift that they're giving to the world is breaking free from the past things and moving into these new things and new ideas. So they're really people that are on a bit of a journey. And if you think in terms of that, if you've started that project, that's kind of the first, once you've got the idea, the next step you've got is like trying to figure out, well, how am I actually going to do this? How am I actually going to make this come together? And that's kind of like a bit of the energy of those crescent people. Very young, very youthful still, very spontaneous, because they've still got that very innocent, childlike energy, but they're a little bit more thinking in terms of you know, how they're going to kind of get the support systems they need in order to make these changes and differences. First quarter moon kind of continues on from that, but there's a little bit more strength, there's a little bit more structure. So these people tend to be a little bit more of your problem solvers. You know, your crescent moon's got kind of the ideas of how we're going to break away and how we're going to do this, but then when the problems come up and the difficulties come up, that's where your first moon people are really in their element, because they're the good ones of going, oh, well, that didn't work, but I know how we can fix it. You know, it's that kind of energy of like, now, you know, we've built some structures and we've got some stuff going in place, but now I know how to solve the problems that might come along with it. So they're good problem solvers. They like to have control of the environment. They like to have control over what's going on, because, you know, there's that energy of kind of building, you know, controlling it. But they're also really good at rebuilding things. So sometimes, you know, they're good with dealing with crisis, I guess is what we're saying here. They like to have control over a situation because then, I guess, if crisis comes along, they know how they're going to fix it or how they're going to deal with it, how they're going to do things about it. So that's a bit of the energy of those people. And again, magically speaking, you know, this is the stage where you're in a project and you've had the ideas, you've worked out what it is that you kind of need to put in place to make it happen, and you've started building those structures, and you've got a few safety mechanisms in place of how you're going to handle things if things go wrong. So that's kind of your next stage in any kind of project in life, and that's kind of their zone of genius, I suppose. Moving into the gibbous moon stage. So the moon's getting a lot bigger now. It's heading towards the full moon. It's quite well developed. But it's not there yet. It's not perfect. And these are your perfectionists. These are the people that are just going like, we've just got to get it right. You know, we're nearly there. We don't, you know, it's nearly the full moon. And if we don't get everything in place and we don't, you know, dot all our I's and cross all our T's and get everything right, we're not going to get the best benefit from that full moon that's happening. So that's kind of how their energy is when they go about things. Everything in life, it's like, we've just got to get it right, because if we don't get it right, we won't get the best results. And they want to get the best results. So this is your gibbous moon people. And this is kind of where, you know, they're in the form of a plant. It's like all they're thinking about is we need to get the best you know, harvest of fruit out of this. You know, we've got to make sure it's all perfect, you know, Has it been fertilized? Has it been, pruned or done whatever that particular plant needs to happen to make sure it gets the best results? The gibbous moons are perfectionists. They want to make sure everything's perfect. And that's all the waxing phases. That's all the phases of growth as we go through. And when you think in terms, I like to put it as a bit of a conversation too, like between these different moon types. If you imagine, you've got a group of people all together and they're working on a project together, and your new moons come out and going like, hey, everybody, I've got this great idea. Follow me. Like, come and see what I'm going to do. This is fantastic. And your crescent moon's going like, yeah, it sounds like a really great idea. Just let me put this in place first, just to make sure that we've got everything taken care of before we move on to that, we've got to break free from the past stuff, and your first quarter moon's going like, yep, and if anything goes wrong, I've got it, I'll fix it, I'm here. And then your gibbous moon comes along and goes, this is such a great project, however, I'm just wondering if we tweak it a little bit this way, it's going to be better. So this is kind of the energy of where these people are working from. So we've got now all the growing stages. They're all want to do the same thing, but they're all doing it from a different kind of stage along the process. Now we move into the full moon, and she is splendid. She is in all her glory, up in the sky, gorgeous. It's like the plant is blossoming, She is just beautiful. The bees are coming and pollinating and doing all the bee stuff, and it's just gorgeous. All right, we've got the promise of the fruit. So this is our full moon stage. And it's interesting because this is the stage that kind of is reflecting. This is the stage where that's really is kind of that networking stage. We've got the networking of the flowers and the bees coming together to, spread the word, I suppose. And then we've got the networking, I guess, of the sun and the moon coming to this perfect opposition where the moon is reflecting the full glory of the sun. So we've got this beautiful situation going on here. And they're really good, I guess, at looking at both sides of a situation too. They can go from the moon to the sun, to the moon to the sun, and see things. And this is why they're quite good at networking and communicating with people in that way. And they take that responsibility quite seriously. Most full moon people communicate in a fairly deliberate way and are very conscious of everything having two sides, That's kind of a part of their being and part of how they go about in the world. Magically speaking, this is when everything has come to its, everything's in place and it's all ready now to just go. You've done it. You've planned everything out. It's beautiful and it's ready to be presented to the world. So this is kind of where we're at with the full moon. Now, as we said, this is a waning moon now. So it's from the moment it gets full, and it's not full until that exact minute that it's full and it starts to get smaller again. While it's still growing, it's still gibbous. And then once it gets completely full and it's starting to shrink back down again, this is the beginning of the waning phase. It's the beginning of the emptying out of all of what we've achieved and collected and done, And this is the next stage that we come to after the full moon is the disseminating moon. And this is when the fruit is ready, The fruit is ready to eat. So these people are very good at sharing and They're very good at communicating their personal experiences with other people. There's a strong teaching kind of vibe about these sorts of people. They've got this message or this sense of I've got a message or something to give to the world. Part of the challenge, I guess, for these people is that until they find what that message is, there can be a tendency to feel a bit like, well, what's the point in all of this, you know, because they don't know what that message is. And unfortunately, learning what that message is that you want to give to the world can take a little bit of time and a little bit of life experience. But once they've got that life experience, they've got all this stuff to teach. So in terms of you know, what we're saying about the project, you know, the continuation of a project, it's like, you know, they've now reached the fruition of the project, and they can see all the things that they've learnt from it and all the things that they can share from what they've just created. Third quarter moon, last quarter moon, so it's getting a lot smaller now. It's down to the last quarter of the moon before it becomes, you know, completely small again. And this is where sort of the fruit's been harvested, but anything that's kind of left on the fruit is there to sort of decompose and feed the seeds for the next cycle. So at some stage, what happens with these sorts of people is that they have kind of a bit of a crisis. A little bit like our first, you know how our first quarter people, they can get a crisis, but they fix it. It's very physical. It's like, oh, if this goes wrong, we'll fix it. But with your third quarter or last quarter people, it's kind of this internal crisis where they start to question everything that's sort of been going on in their lives and going on around them. And these people quite often do a complete turnaround in their lives and go off in completely different directions. And they might do that several times in their life because they're questioning all the time. So these are the people that, like, you know, may have been, you know, brought up in a specific religion or a specific way of life and have never questioned it and have just gone along with it because that's how they've been brought up. And yeah, that's the way it is, and it's nice and it's lovely and it's right. And then suddenly sort of start to go, don't know anymore about that. And it can be really challenging because they actually don't really necessarily want to change because it's quite comfortable where they are. But it's kind of like they get pushed and pushed into this point where they go like, I just can't actually do this anymore. I have no choice to change. And they're change makers. So they can change like big stuff in the world too. They're the people that will go like, they'll see things on a political or social kind of level and go like, I just can't actually do this anymore. I need to change it. I need to do something about it. So they're change makers in our world. Whether they change something huge in the world or whether they're just changing something within themselves, they'll go through these patterns of kind of having these internal crises that then have to be dealt with. And it's a little bit like that, as I say, the fruit is decomposing there to feed the new seeds. It's like what's gone before is no longer any good anymore. It's changing, it's rotting away, and we need to think about what the new seeds are going to be, how we're going to, do something differently. And that's the strong feeling of this kind of third quarter moon. And we get that in a project too, because once we've, like I said before, if we're doing a project, when we get to that end stage of it, we generally find there's a lot of things that we've learnt along the way, which we looked at, all the things we learnt at in the last stage, that disseminating stage. And now when we get to this third quarter stage, we start looking at what we need to change the next time around, how we can do it differently to make it better. So that's the next stage, and that's kind of where these people's kind of zone of genius is. How can we change this and make it better? Then finally, finally we have the balsamic moon, and this is our last phase. This is the phase where it's getting like really small again, it's that waning crescent. It's getting really small, getting really dark again. And this last phase is kind of where those seeds are now kind of scattered to the earth and given out like for future, you know. They're not ready to germinate like the new moon, but they're being scattered around for the future. So very much these people are the kind of people that might have like 1 foot in the present and 1 foot in the future. You know, people that are always thinking about how things are going to progress and what they can contribute to the future. So we see people that will do things, you know, you've got so many of these beautiful European gardens that were designed and planted hundreds of years before, and the designers of these gardens knew they would never see the outcome of their work. They knew that they would never see this, but they envisioned what it was going to be like in a couple of hundred years when people are walking through those gardens. You know, they could see what they were giving to the future. This is the energy of the balsamic moon. Planning and thinking for the future. What can we leave for future generations? How can we make this better for the future? Sometimes there can also be a bit of a psychic feel to them too, because they are always like kind of in the future. Very wise people generally, or at least they give that feeling of wisdom, you know, like an old soul kind of a feel about them. So that is all of the waning phases as the moon is shrinking down again. And again, if we look at that in terms of conversation, if we go back to that little conversation where we've got this new moon, excuse me, we've got this new moon that is kind of going like, you know, come on, let's all do this exciting new thing. And we've got the crescent moon that goes, yep, I want to do this exciting new thing too, but I just need to break free from a few of these little things from the past and find some supports first. The first quarter says, well, you know, I'll get all these structures in place. And if anything happens, don't you worry, I'm going to fix it. Gibbous moon goes, looks pretty good. Just think it might be a little bit better this way. We'll just tweak it a little to the left, you know. Full moon goes, this is fabulous. Let's all connect and share this experience with the world. Disseminating moon says, well, this has been a wonderful success, and let me tell you why. You know, third quarter, just not feeling it anymore. It's kind of like, yeah, it was good, but it's just not working for me now. Need to build something new. And balsamic comes along and says, yes, and I shall spread the word and make sure it continues on into the future. And so the cycle goes on and on. Now, we live through all of these cycles. We're never stuck in the cycle that we are born in. We live through it through various different avenues in our life, through progressions and all sorts of astrological reasons as well, as to why we go through these various stages. But it's kind of like that stage you were born in is like your genius zone, your spot where you feel really comfortable, that spot where everything is really natural to you. You know, I'm a natural born gibbous moon, and I will be accused of being too picky, too fussy, too whatever, because this is part of my instinctual way of being. It's part of who I am, you know. I don't necessarily always mean to be those things, but this is a part of who I am. My mother, she's a new moon, and oh my goodness, she is like 82 and she's off at the gym twice a week, and she's, you know, always doing new things. If there's a jumpy castle with a slippery slide, she might not be able to jump too high anymore, but she's on there with the kids. You know, she's a new moon, and she is always going to be young in her way of presenting and going through the world. You know, these are parts of who we are, and these are the first clues, I guess, of how the sun and the moon are going to work together in order to bring about whatever that sun moon purpose is. If you remember what I said at the beginning, the sun represents that kind of that spark of what makes you feel fulfilled, that spark of your spirit or your soul, or what you feel that your purpose is. And the moon represents how you're going to actually bring that into this world. And they work together, and they need each other in order to work together. The spirit or the soul cannot achieve its goal without a physical body to make that happen in, and the moon represents that physical body, and that physical body cannot achieve that spirit's goal unless that spirit is within that body. So they kind of like work together very powerfully. And when you think of it that way, it can kind of change the way that you think about your star sign or sun sign too. Because often in astrology, we just go, oh yeah, you know, I'm a Virgo, I'm a Pisces, I'm a Sagittarian, whatever. And we expect that that's what our whole personality, our whole way of being is supposed to be about. And it's not. What that represents is the purpose or the spark of what gives you that fulfillment has to kind of fulfill those Virgo, Pisces, Sag, Leo qualities. And if you think of it in those terms, you may suddenly find yourself relating a little bit more to your star sign, sun sign, than you have before, because you'll start going, oh yeah, okay, I'm not necessarily, you know, super Virgo in the way that I present or behave, but when it comes to this thing that gives me fulfillment, it really fits and ticks all the Virgo boxes. So, you know, it's like that's my purpose, that's my thing. I'm going to do it in a really, like, you know, Libran way, or I'm going to do it in a really Scorpio way, but the actual thing I'm doing ticks all the Virgo boxes, or, you know, whatever. So, you know, it's an interesting thing. It's a first stage, like a first layer of astrology. Astrology just goes on and on, layer over layer over layer over layer. This is like a really first thing, but it's an interesting first thing. So if you can, have a Google, see what your phase is and see how that fits with you. See how it feels with you. Now, remember that I am available for consultation. So if you want to know more about your phase and your sun and your moon and pretty much everything in your chart planet-wise and what's going on there, feel free to book a consultation with me on my website. And consultations are all done through Zoom, so it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can still book in for a consultation, and we can talk about all this stuff in relation to your chart and your life. That's all on the website, theastrologyparlour.com. I've also got a course on there at the moment, the Goddess Project. If that's something that you think might interest you, have a little look at that, check that out. It's all online and it's all self-paced. You just work through it at your own pace and do like the pre-recorded sessions, so you don't have to be available at any specific time for it. I've got a free webinar coming up. That's on the 26th of this month, 10 a.m. Adelaide time. This is talking about the Athena stuff, and it's mostly going over the same kind of Athena stuff that we went over in the first podcast, but it's a live webinar via Zoom, so you get to type in questions and stuff like that, so it's a little bit more interesting if you've got more that you want to talk about. Plus I'll let you know exactly where which sign Pallas Athena was in when you were born, so that's also good to know, and that's completely free if you want to register. If you can't make it on the day, that's fine, register anyway, because you'll get the recording. So that's pretty much it. So if you haven't subscribed to if you're watching it on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, and you know, press the like and the notification bell and all of that. If you're listening to it through a podcast, please subscribe there. And yeah, check out the website, check out the Facebook page, The Astrology Parlour, and there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, and also enroll for the newsletter if you like, because then you won't miss out on any of the other stuff. So cool. Have a wonderful week, everybody, and I will talk to you again soon. Don't forget to wish on a star. Bye.